When a grieving CEO hides in his office and hears a cleaning woman softly singing an old lullaby, he doesn't expect her voice to break open everything he thought he'd buried. But some melodies refuse to be ignored. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The evening sun cast long shadows across the polished floors of Harrington Global Holdings. Most of the employees had already gone home, leaving behind empty desks and quiet hallways. On the 52nd floor, the cleaning cart's squeaky wheel echoed through the corridor as Celeste Martin pushed it toward the last office on her route. At 34, Celeste's face showed the weariness of someone who carried too many burdens. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her blue uniform had seen better days. Still, there was a quiet dignity in the way she moved, in how carefully she treated even the smallest tasks. She paused outside the corner office, taking a deep breath. Mr. Harrington's office was always the last one she cleaned. It was her private ritual, saving the most intimidating space for last, when she knew she'd be alone. Celeste pushed open the heavy door and wheeled her cart inside. The office was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the glittering city below. Everything was perfectly organized, not a paper out of place, not a speck of dust on the sleek, dark furniture. Just like him, Celeste muttered to herself as she began dusting the desk. Cold and perfect. Everyone in the building knew about Victor Harrington. At 42, he'd built an empire that made him one of the richest men in the city. But he was also known for his icy demeanor. The staff called him the machine behind his back, a man who seemed incapable of smiling, let alone showing any real emotion. Celeste had only seen him up close a few times, usually when he was barking orders at some trembling executive. His face was handsome in a hard way, with sharp cheekbones and penetrating grey eyes that never seemed to warm. As she cleaned, Celeste began to hum softly. It was an old habit, something her mother had always done while doing housework. The song was a lullaby her mother used to sing to her and her sister when they were children. The gentle melody filled the empty office as Celeste moved from the desk to the windows, wiping away fingerprints from the glass. Her voice grew a little stronger as she lost herself in the familiar tune, the words coming back to her as she sang, "Sleep now, my darling, the day's almost through. The stars in the heavens are waiting for you." What Celeste didn't know was that she wasn't alone. Hidden behind the partially open door of the private bathroom, Victor Harrington stood frozen, briefcase in hand, ready to leave for the day. He'd been about to step out when the cleaning woman entered, and something, perhaps the quiet dignity in her movements, had made him pause. Now as her soft voice filled his office, Victor felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a crack forming in the wall of ice he'd built around himself since his brother's death 5 years ago. Michael's accident had been Victor's fault. At least that's what he believed. He'd been the one who suggested the sailing trip despite the weather warnings. He'd been the one who insisted they could handle the storm. And he'd been the one who survived, while Michael was swept overboard. Since that day, Victor had shut down completely. He poured himself into work, building his company higher and higher, as if success could somehow fill the hollow space inside him. Nothing touched him anymore, not his achievements, not the fear in his employees' eyes, not the string of beautiful women who briefly shared his bed, but never his thoughts. Nothing until now. So until this simple song, sung by a cleaning woman who thought she was alone, Victor watched her through the crack in the door. She wasn't what anyone would call beautiful in the conventional sense, but there was something about her, a quiet grace, a hidden strength. And that voice, it wrapped around him like a warm blanket on a cold night. When she finally finished cleaning and wheeled her cart out, Victor emerged from his hiding place. He walked to the window where she had stood and placed his hand against the glass, feeling the lingering warmth from where her fingers had been. For the first time in 5 years, Victor Harrington felt something stirring inside him, a tiny flame in the darkness that had become his life. The next day, Victor found himself thinking about the cleaning woman and her song. He couldn't focus on the quarterly reports. He barely heard what his executives were saying during the morning meeting. All he could think about was whether she would come back that night, whether she would sing again. At 5:30 p.m., Victor dismissed his assistant, Janet. "But sir, you have the conference call with Tokyo at 7, Janet reminded him, confused by his unusual behavior. "Reschedule it," Victor said curtly. "And I don't want to be disturbed for the rest of the evening. Clear my schedule until tomorrow morning." Janet nodded, knowing better than to question him further. As she left, she noticed something odd. The CEO's office lights were dimmed, not blazing as they usually were when he worked late. Inside his office, Victor positioned himself carefully. He moved a chair into the small reading alcove adjacent to the bathroom, where he could see without being seen. Then he waited. At precisely 8:15 p.m., he heard the squeaky wheel of the cleaning cart. His heart, which he'd almost forgotten he had, began to beat faster. The door opened, and there she was again. Tonight, Victor noticed more details about her. The name tag that read Celeste. The way she rubbed her lower back when she thought no one was watching. The small locket she wore around her neck that she occasionally touched, as if for reassurance. As she began to clean, Victor held his breath, waiting. Would she sing again? For several minutes, Celeste worked in silence, efficiently dusting and polishing. Victor felt a stab of disappointment. Perhaps last night had been a rare occurrence, but then as she began to wipe down the windows, it started. First a hum, so faint he almost missed it, then words, soft and clear. "The moon's gentle light will watch over your dreams. The night will protect you, or so it seems." Victor closed his eyes, letting the melody wash over him. He didn't understand what was happening, only that when she sang, the constant ache in his chest seemed to lessen. For the next week, Victor arranged to be hidden in his office when Celeste came to clean. Each night she sang, sometimes the same lullaby, sometimes other songs. And each night something inside Victor began to thaw a little more. Out of curiosity, he asked HR to pull her employee file. The facts of Celeste Martin's life were laid bare before him in cold bureaucratic language. Divorced 3 years ago. Guardian to her 9-year-old niece Lily, after her sister and brother-in-law died in a car accident. Working 2 jobs, cleaning at Harrington Global at night, cashier at a grocery store during the day. No complaints filed. Excellent attendance record. Recommendations from previous employers describing her as reliable, trustworthy, and hard-working. The file told him facts, but nothing about the woman herself. Nothing about what made her sing so beautifully while doing the most thankless job in his building. On Friday night, Victor made a decision. When Celeste came in to clean, he would reveal himself. He would speak to her. He wasn't sure what he would say. Victor Harrington wasn't a man who engaged in small talk. He commanded, he directed, he closed billion-dollar deals with a single nod. But he had no idea how to simply talk to someone, especially not someone like her. As usual, Celeste entered at 8:15 p.m., unaware of his presence. She began her routine, and Victor watched from his hidden spot, gathering his courage. When she started to sing, he almost changed his mind. There was something sacred about this moment, about her private performance. Who was he to intrude? But then Celeste moved to the windows, and as she cleaned, she looked out at the city below. Victor saw something in her expression then, a longing, a sadness that matched his own. Before he could think better of it, he stood up. The movement caught Celeste's eye. She gasped, dropping her cleaning cloth as she spun around. "Mr. Harrington, I'm so sorry. I didn't know anyone was here." Her face flushed with embarrassment as she quickly bent to retrieve the cloth. Victor stepped forward, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. "Don't stop," he said, his voice softer than it had been in a long, long time. Celeste stared at him, confused. "Excuse me?" "The song," Victor clarified, feeling awkward in a way the powerful CEO never did. "Please don't stop singing." Her eyes widened with understanding, and then with mortification. "You heard me singing. I'm so sorry. I thought I was alone. It won't happen again." "No," Victor said quickly. "That's not what I meant. I liked it." The words felt strange in his mouth, an admission of pleasure he rarely allowed himself. Celeste didn't know how to respond. In her world, Men like Victor Harrington didn't speak to women like her unless something was wrong. They certainly didn't ask them to sing. The silence stretched between them, uncomfortable and charged with something neither could name. Finally, Victor asked, "What was that song, the one about the moon and stars?" Celeste hesitated, still unsure if she was in trouble. It's just an old lullaby my mother used to sing to me and my sister. Nothing special." "It's beautiful," Victor said, and he meant it. Would you teach it to me sometime?" The request was so unexpected, so out of character for the notorious machine, that Celeste almost laughed. But the expression on Victor's face stopped her. He looked vulnerable, earnest. Nothing like the cold titan of industry everyone feared. I suppose I could," she said uncertainly. Victor nodded, then seemed to remember himself. "I should let you finish your work, but perhaps tomorrow, after your shift." Celeste thought about her niece waiting at home with the babysitter, about how every extra hour cost money she didn't have. But something in Victor's eyes, a loneliness that echoed her own, made her nod. "Okay," she said. "Tomorrow." As she wheeled her cart out of his office a few minutes later, Celeste couldn't believe what had just happened. Victor Harrington, the man everyone in the building feared, wanted her to teach him a lullaby. It made no sense. She thought about her sister, about what she would say if she was still alive. "Only you, Celeste," she would have laughed. "Only you could make the machine ask for a bedtime song." But as Celeste waited for the elevator, she couldn't help wondering what had put that look in Victor Harrington's eyes, that hunger for something simple and beautiful, like an old lullaby sung by a woman who cleaned his office. She didn't know it yet, but that brief conversation would change both their lives forever. The small apartment was quiet except for the sound of cereal being poured into a bowl. Celeste watched as her niece Lily, a serious 9-year-old with braided hair and her mother's eyes, carefully added milk to her breakfast. "Did you finish your homework last night?" Celeste asked, sipping her coffee. She'd been up since 5 a.m., her mind racing with thoughts of her strange encounter with Victor Harrington. Lily nodded. "Mrs. Garcia helped me with my math. She said I'm getting better at fractions." Mrs. Garcia was their elderly neighbor who watched Lily when Celeste worked nights. The arrangement wasn't ideal, but it was all Celeste could afford. "That's great. Sweetie." Celeste glanced at the clock. "Hurry up now, the bus will be here soon." As she walked Lily to the bus stop, Celeste wondered how she would explain to Victor Harrington that she couldn't stay late tonight. She had promised Lily they would bake cookies for her class party tomorrow. The thought of saying no to the most powerful man in the building made her stomach twist with anxiety. People who disappointed Victor Harrington usually found themselves unemployed, and Celeste couldn't afford to lose this job. At the grocery store where she worked during the day, Celeste was distracted. She gave a customer incorrect change and nearly dropped a carton of eggs. Her manager Dale pulled her aside during her break. "Everything okay, Celeste? You seem a million miles away today." She forced a smile. "Just tired. Lily had nightmares again last night." Dale nodded sympathetically. He knew about Celeste's situation, how she had taken in her niece after her sister's death, how she worked herself to the bone to provide a stable home. "Why don't you take off early today? We're not busy, and you look like you could use some rest." Celeste wanted to refuse. She needed every hour of pay. But the truth was she did need time to think, to figure out what to say to Victor Harrington. "Thanks, Dale, I appreciate it." At home, Celeste took a rare afternoon nap, waking just in time to meet Lily's school bus. As they baked cookies together, Lily chattering about her day, Celeste made her decision. She would tell Mr. Harrington the truth, that her niece needed her at home tonight. If he fired her, she would find another night job. "Aunt Celeste, are you listening?" Lily waved a cookie cutter in front of her face. "Sorry, sweetie, what did you say?" I said, "Can we make star-shaped cookies too? Not just circles?" Celeste smiled, pushing thoughts of Victor Harrington away. "Of course we can." Later, after Mrs. Garcia arrived to stay with Lily, Celeste headed to Harrington Global. Her stomach was in knots as the elevator carried her up to the 52nd floor. She would start her regular cleaning routine, and when she reached Mr. Harrington's office, she would tell him she couldn't stay late. But when she pushed her cart to his door at 8:15, Victor wasn't there. The office was empty, the lights dimmed. Celeste felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment as she began to clean. She was wiping down his desk when the door opened. Victor stood there, slightly out of breath, as if he had rushed to get here. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said, closing the door behind him. The Tokyo call ran longer than expected. Celeste straightened, clutching her cleaning cloth. "Mr. Harrington, about tonight." "Please," he interrupted. "Call me Victor." The words seemed to surprise him as much as they did her. Celeste blinked, taken aback by the request. No one in the building called him by his first name, not even the senior executives who had been with the company for decades. "Victor," she said hesitantly, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "I can't stay late tonight. My niece is waiting for me at home." She braced herself for his anger, for the cold dismissal that would certainly follow. Instead, Victor nodded. "Of course. Family comes first." Now it was Celeste's turn to be surprised. "You're not upset?" A shadow crossed Victor's face. "I know what it's like to lose family. I wouldn't want to keep you from yours." There was such raw pain in his voice that Celeste forgot her fear. "You lost someone too?" Victor moved to the windows, looking out at the city lights. "My younger brother, Michael, 5 years ago." Celeste recognized the tone, the weight of guilt that she sometimes heard in her own voice when she spoke of her sister. "I'm sorry, was it sudden?" "A sailing accident." Victor's voice was flat, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the windowsill. "We were caught in a storm. He went overboard. I couldn't save him." The grief in his words was so familiar, so much like the grief Celeste carried for her sister, that she moved closer without thinking. "That wasn't your fault," she said softly. Victor turned, his eyes hard with self-recrimination. "You don't know that." "No," Celeste admitted. "But I know what it's like to blame yourself for something you couldn't control." She touched the locket around her neck. "My sister and her husband died in a car accident 3 years ago. I was supposed to be with them that night, but I cancelled at the last minute because I wasn't feeling well. And you think if you had been there, you could have prevented it?" Celeste nodded, her throat tight. "Or at least died with them, instead of being left behind to wonder if I could have done something different." They stood in silence, 2 people, bound by similar grief, similar guilt. The powerful CEO and the cleaning woman suddenly on equal ground. Finally, Victor spoke. "Your niece, is she your sister's daughter?" "Yes, Lily. She's 9. And it's just the 2 of you?" Celeste nodded. "My ex-husband left before the accident, and my parents are gone. Lily's grandparents on her father's side live in Florida, but they're too elderly to take care of her." Victor seemed to be considering something. "What about the song, the lullaby? My mother used to sing it to us when we were little. After she died, my sister kept the tradition going with Lily." Celeste smiled sadly. "Now I sing it to Lily when she has nightmares about losing her parents." Victor moved to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. "Janet, please cancel my morning meetings tomorrow." Celeste's eyes widened. "Mr. Harrington, Victor, you don't need to change your schedule. I was just explaining why I can't stay tonight." Victor looked at her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "When do you finish work tomorrow?" I'm off from the grocery store at 3, but I don't start here until 6. "Would you and Lily have dinner with me tomorrow? Around 5. The invitation was so unexpected that Celeste could only stare at him. "Dinner? With you? Why?" Victor seemed unsure how to answer. Finally, he said, "Because when you sing, I remember things I thought I'd forgotten. Good things from before Michael died, and I'd like to understand why. It wasn't a romantic invitation. It wasn't even really a friendly one. It was the request of a man trying to solve a puzzle, the puzzle of his own emotions, newly awakened." Celeste should have said no. Men like Victor Harrington didn't invite women like her to dinner unless they wanted something. But the raw honesty in his eyes made her nod. "Okay, but nothing fancy." Lily gets uncomfortable in fancy places. The corner of Victor's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Nothing fancy," he agreed. The next day at 5 p.m., Celeste and Lily waited outside a small Italian restaurant in their neighborhood. Celeste had chosen it because it was casual enough that Lily would feel comfortable, but nice enough that Victor Harrington wouldn't feel completely out of place. She'd spent far too long deciding what to wear, finally settling on a simple blue dress that her sister had always said brought out her eyes. Lily wore her favorite jeans and a sweater, her hair in the neat braids Celeste had spent extra time on that morning. "Is your boss nice?" Lily asked, kicking at a pebble on the sidewalk. Celeste hesitated. "He's different, but I think there's more to him than people see." "Is he handsome?" Lily gave her aunt a sly look. At 9, she was already aware of the romance novels Celeste sometimes read before bed. "That's not—" Celeste began, but stopped when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Victor stepped out, and Celeste had to admit that yes, he was handsome. He'd changed from his usual business suit into dark slacks and a grey sweater that softened his usual severe appearance. He looked younger, less intimidating. "You must be Lily," Victor said, bending slightly to address the little girl. His voice was gentle, nothing like the commanding tone he used at the office. Lily studied him with solemn eyes. "You're very tall." Victor's lips twitched again with that almost smile. "Yes, I am. My daddy was tall too," Lily said matter-of-factly, "but he's in heaven now with my mommy." Celeste saw the flicker of pain in Victor's eyes, the recognition of loss. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said, his voice soft. "I lost someone special too." Lily nodded, accepting this information with the straightforward manner of children. "That's sad, but at least you have my Aunt Celeste now. She makes everything better." Victor glanced at Celeste, something warm in his eyes. "I'm beginning to see that." Inside the restaurant, they were led to a quiet corner booth. Celeste noticed the owner, Mario, doing a double take when he saw Victor Harrington in his modest establishment. But to her relief, he didn't make a fuss. Lily immediately began coloring on the paper placemat with the crayons the hostess had provided, while Victor studied the simple menu with the same concentration he probably gave to million-dollar contracts. "The spaghetti and meatballs is very good," Celeste offered, feeling strangely nervous. Victor set down his menu. "Then that's what I'll have." As they waited for their food, Lily peppered Victor with questions. What was his favorite color? Blue. Did he have any pets? No, but he'd had a dog named Rex when he was a boy. Could he do a handstand? Not anymore, but he used to be quite good at it. With each question, Victor seemed to relax a little more. He answered Lily with a patience that surprised Celeste, given his reputation for being brusque and impatient with his employees. When their food arrived, they fell into a comfortable silence. Celeste watched as Victor carefully twirled spaghetti onto his fork, clearly trying not to make a mess. It was such a humanizing gesture that she had to hide a smile. "What?" Victor asked, catching her expression. "Nothing, it's just not how I pictured having dinner with my boss. Is it better or worse than you imagined?" "Better," Celeste admitted. "Much better." After dinner, Victor insisted on driving them home. In the car, Lily fell asleep, her head against Celeste's shoulder. "She's a remarkable child," Victor said quietly, glancing at them in the rearview mirror. "Yes, she is. She's been through so much, but she still finds joy in everything." When they arrived at Celeste's apartment building, Victor frowned at the graffiti-covered walls and broken security door. "This isn't a safe neighborhood." Celeste bristled slightly. "It's what I can afford." Victor looked like he wanted to say more but thought better of it. Instead, he carried the sleeping Lily up to their apartment, gently laying her on the bed in the small room she called out. Standing in Celeste's tiny living room, Victor looked out of place. Too large, too polished for the shabby furniture and worn carpet. But he didn't seem to notice, his eyes taking in the family photos on the wall, the neat stack of library books on the coffee table. "Thank you for dinner," Celeste said, standing by the door. "Lily had a wonderful time." Victor nodded, suddenly awkward again, as if unsure of the social protocol for ending an evening that wasn't quite a date, but was definitely more than a business meeting. "The song," he finally said. "Would you teach it to me now?" Celeste hesitated, aware of how intimate it felt to be alone with him in her small apartment. But there was something so earnest in his request, so vulnerable, that she nodded. "It's simple, really," she said, and began to hum the melody. Victor listened intently, his eyes never leaving her face. When she sang the words, his expression softened, the hard lines around his mouth easing. "It's about finding peace in the darkness," Celeste explained. "About knowing you're not alone, even when it feels like you are." "Sing it again," Victor said, his voice husky. "Please." So Celeste sang the lullaby once more, her voice filling the small apartment with its gentle melody. And as she sang, Victor Harrington, feared CEO, notorious machine, closed his eyes and smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a slight curving of his lips, a momentary easing of the grief etched into his face. But to Celeste, it felt like witnessing something rare and precious, like seeing the first flower bloom after a long, hard winter. When she finished, Victor opened his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. As he left her apartment, Celeste felt as though something significant had shifted between them. They weren't just boss and employee anymore. They weren't quite friends yet, either. They were something else. Two broken people who had somehow recognized in each other a chance to become whole again. As she closed the door behind him, Celeste wondered what tomorrow would bring. Would Victor acknowledge her at work? Would he pretend none of this had happened? Or was this the beginning of something neither of them had expected to find? Whatever came next, Celeste knew that tonight had changed something. For the first time, since her sister died, she felt a spark of hope for the future. A future that somehow inexplicably might include Victor Harrington. 2 weeks passed, and Victor became a regular part of Celeste and Lily's life. They had dinner together 3 more times, always at small casual restaurants where Lily felt comfortable. Victor had even joined them for a Saturday afternoon at the park, looking oddly out of place in his casual clothes, but smiling more than Celeste had ever thought possible. At work, things were different. During the day, Victor maintained his reputation as the machine, driving his executives hard and making ruthless business decisions. But at night, when Celeste came to clean his office, he was there waiting for her, ready to talk, or sometimes just to listen while she sang. It was a strange friendship, the powerful CEO and the cleaning woman, but it worked. Victor never made Celeste feel less than him, and she never treated him like he was special because of his money or position. They were just 2 people who had found comfort in each other's company. But not everyone was happy about this new development. Janet, Victor's longtime assistant, watched with suspicious eyes whenever Celeste pushed her cleaning cart onto the executive floor. The other cleaning staff had started to whisper about the special attention Celeste received from the boss. And Richard Blackwood, Victor's second in command, had begun to ask probing questions about Victor's sudden interest in the company's night cleaning service. One evening, as Celeste was leaving Victor's office after their now regular conversation, she nearly collided with Richard in the hallway. "Well, well," Richard said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "If it isn't the Nightingale herself." Celeste felt her face flush. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackwood. I was just finishing up." Richard leaned against the wall, blocking her path. He was an attractive man in his late 40s, with carefully styled silver hair and an expensive suit. But there was something cold in his eyes that had always made Celeste uncomfortable. "You know, I've been wondering what makes you so special," Richard said, his voice low. "What makes Victor Harrington, who hasn't shown interest in anything, or anyone since his brother died, suddenly take notice of a cleaning woman?" Celeste gripped her cart tightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Richard laughed softly. "Don't play dumb, sweetheart. The whole building is talking about it. Victor Harrington's little songbird." Celeste felt a flash of anger. "I need to finish my rounds, Mr. Blackwood." "Victor's not a man who forms attachments easily," Richard continued, ignoring her attempt to leave. "And when he does, they rarely last. I'd hate to see you get your hopes up, only to have them crushed when he gets bored and moves on." Before Celeste could respond, a cold voice cut through the corridor. "Is there a problem here, Richard?" Victor stood in the doorway of his office, his expression thunderous. Richard straightened immediately, his smug smile fading. "No problem at all, Victor. Just making small talk with your cleaning lady." The way he said it made the job title sound like an insult. Victor's jaw tightened. "Ms. Martin has finished cleaning my office for the evening. And you have the Singapore proposal to finalize before tomorrow's call, don't you?" Richard's smile became forced. Of course, I was just heading back to my office. He nodded curtly to Celeste. Good evening, Ms. Martin. As Richard walked away, Victor turned to Celeste. Did he say something to upset you? Celeste shook her head, not wanting to create more problems. It's nothing, office gossip, that's all. Victor frowned. About us? The us caught Celeste off guard. Was there an us? They had shared meals, conversations, even a few laughs, but they had never defined what was happening between them. People talk, she said simply. It doesn't matter. But Victor's frown deepened. It matters if it's making you uncomfortable. I'm fine, Celeste assured him. Really, I need to finish my work now. Victor nodded, but his expression remained troubled as he watched her wheel her cart down the hallway. The next day, Celeste was sorting through bills at her kitchen table when her phone rang. It was Dale from the grocery store. Celeste, I'm sorry to call on your day off, but we're short-handed. Any chance you could come in for a few hours? Celeste looked at the stack of unpaid bills. Her rent was due next week, and Lily needed new shoes for school. She couldn't afford to turn down extra hours. I'll be there in 30 minutes, she said, already reaching for her coat. Mrs. Garcia agreed to watch Lily, and Celeste rushed to the store. She had been working for about an hour when she looked up to see Victor Harrington standing in her checkout line, looking completely out of place in his tailored suit among the weekend shoppers in their casual clothes. Victor! Celeste blinked, in surprise. What are you doing here? He held up a small basket containing a single apple. Shopping. The woman behind him in line frowned at the interruption. Celeste quickly scanned Victor's apple and took his money, acutely aware of her grocery store uniform and the curious stares from her co-workers. Can we talk? Victor asked quietly. Celeste glanced at the growing line. I'm working, and I can't take a break right now. We're short-staffed. Victor looked around, noting the harried expressions of the few employees visible. When do you finish? Not until 4, Celeste said, handing him his change. I'll wait. Before she could protest, he moved aside for the next customer, taking a seat on a bench near the front of the store. For the next 3 hours, Victor Harrington, CEO of one of the city's largest corporations, sat patiently in a busy grocery store, occasionally checking his phone but mostly just watching Celeste work. At 4 o'clock, when Celeste's replacement arrived at the register, she approached Victor with a mix of embarrassment and curiosity. You didn't have to wait all this time. Victor stood, straightening his jacket. I wanted to. Can I drive you home? Outside, his sleek black car drew stares from shoppers pushing carts across the parking lot. Once inside, Celeste turned to him. Why are you really here, Victor? He was quiet for a moment, his hands resting on the steering wheel. I've been thinking about what Richard said yesterday, about people talking. Celeste sighed. It doesn't matter. It does, Victor interrupted. Not because I care what they think, but because I care what you think. He turned to face her. What is this, Celeste? What are we doing? The directness of the question took her breath away. I don't know, she admitted. I thought we were becoming friends. Friends? Victor repeated the word as if testing it out. I haven't had a friend since Michael died. I'm not sure I remember how it works. There was such honesty in his admission that Celeste felt her heart ache for him. You're doing fine, she assured him. Friendship is just being there for each other, listening, caring about what happens to the other person. Victor nodded slowly. And is that all this is? Friendship? The question hung between them, heavy with potential. Celeste thought about the way her heart raced when Victor smiled, about how often she caught herself thinking about him during the day. But she also thought about the vast differences in their lives, about what Richard had said about Victor getting bored and moving on. I think friendship is a good place to start, she said carefully. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, or relief. She couldn't tell. I should get home to Lily, Celeste said, breaking the tension. Victor started the car without another word. They drove in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived at Celeste's apartment building, Victor insisted on walking her up as he always did. Mrs. Garcia was at the door before they even knocked, her wrinkled face creased with worry. Celeste, thank goodness you're here. Lily's running. Her fever. She came home from the park complaining that her head hurt and she's been getting worse. Celeste rushed past her to Lily's bedroom. The little girl lay curled up under her blankets, her face flushed and damp with sweat. "Lily, sweetie," Celeste said, placing a hand on her forehead. It was burning hot. "I don't feel good, Aunt Celeste," Lily whimpered. "My head hurts really bad." Celeste turned to Mrs. Garcia. "How long has she been like this?" "The fever started about an hour ago. I gave her some children's Tylenol, but it hasn't helped much." Victor appeared in the doorway, his face concerned. "What's wrong?" "Lily's sick," Celeste said, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "I need to get her to a doctor." "I'll drive you," Victor said immediately. "Is there a hospital nearby?" Celeste hesitated. The nearest hospital was the county facility, always. Overcrowded with long wait times. But it was all her insurance would cover. Victor seemed to read her thoughts. "I know a pediatrician who will see her right away, Dr. Chen. She's excellent. I can't afford a private doctor," Celeste began, but Victor cut her off. "I'm not asking you to. Please, Celeste, let me help." The desperation in his voice made her decision for her. "Okay." Victor carried Lily to the car, wrapping her in a blanket as Celeste grabbed her insurance card and purse. Within 20 minutes, they were in an upscale medical office where a kind-faced woman greeted them warmly. "Victor, it's been a while," Dr. Chen said, leading them to an examination room. "Thank you for seeing us so quickly, May," Victor said. "This is Celeste and her niece, Lily." Dr. Chen examined Lily thoroughly, her manner gentle and efficient. "It's strep throat," she diagnosed. "Quite a severe case. We'll start her on antibiotics right away." While Dr. Chen wrote a prescription, Celeste turned to Victor. "How do you know her?" A shadow crossed his face. "She was Michael's doctor when he was a child. We've stayed in touch. After picking up Lily's medication at a 24-hour pharmacy, they returned to Celeste's apartment." Victor insisted on staying to help, holding Lily while Celeste prepared a cool compress for her forehead, then reading to her until she fell asleep. It was nearly midnight when they finally sat down at Celeste's small kitchen table, cups of instant coffee in front of them. "Thank you," Celeste said, her voice thick with gratitude. "For everything." Victor shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. I wanted to help." "Still," Celeste insisted, "most bosses wouldn't spend their Saturday driving. They're cleaning Lady's sick niece to the doctor." "Is that all I am to you?" Victor asked quietly. "Your boss?" Celeste met his gaze. "No, you know you're not." Victor reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was warm, his fingers curling around hers with gentle pressure. "When Michael died, I shut down completely," he said, his voice low. "I built walls around myself so thick that nothing could get through. Nothing and no one. Until you started singing in my office that night." Celeste felt her heart pounding. "Victor, let me finish, please," he said. "I've been alone for so long, Celeste, surrounded by people but completely alone. And then suddenly, there you were with your voice and your kindness and your quiet strength. And for the first time in 5 years, I didn't want to be alone anymore." The raw emotion in his voice brought tears to Celeste's eyes. "I've been alone too," she whispered. "Even with Lily, there's been this emptiness since my sister died, this feeling that a part of me was missing." Victor's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "And now?" "Now?" Celeste took a deep breath. "Now I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of letting myself believe that someone like you could really care about someone like me. That it isn't just gratitude because I sang a song that reminded you of better times." Victor's face softened. "It's not gratitude, Celeste. It's so much more than that." For a long moment they sat in silence, their hands still joined across the table. Then, from Lily's room, came the sound of coughing. Celeste stood immediately. "I should check on her." Victor nodded, releasing her hand. "Of course." While Celeste tended to Lily, giving her another dose of medicine and helping her sip some water, Victor wandered around the small living room. He looked at the family photos on the wall, Celeste with her sister, both smiling at the camera. Lily as a toddler held in her mother's arms. Celeste's parents on their anniversary, looking proud and happy. When Celeste returned, she found Victor studying a framed sheet of music hanging near the window. "It's the lullaby," she explained. My mother wrote it down for us when we were little. It's the only thing I have in her handwriting." Victor turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You gave me something precious that night when you sang to me. I want to give you something in return." "You already have," Celeste said. "Tonight with Lily." "No," Victor shook his head. "That was just being decent. I want to give you something that matters." Before Celeste could ask what he meant, her phone rang. It was Mrs. Garcia checking on Lily. By the time she finished the call, Victor was putting on his coat. "You should get some rest," he said. "I'll come by tomorrow to see how Lily's doing, if that's okay." Celeste nodded, suddenly exhausted. "That would be nice." At the door, Victor paused. He reached out and gently touched Celeste's cheek, his fingers warm against her skin. "Good night, Celeste." After he left, Celeste leaned against the closed door, her heart racing. She didn't know what was happening between them, only that it felt both terrifying and wonderful at the same time. In his car, Victor sat for a long moment before starting the engine. He felt lighter somehow, as if a weight he'd carried for years had begun to lift. He thought of Celeste's face when she'd thanked him for helping with Lily, of the trust in her eyes, when she'd finally admitted she was scared. For the first time since Michael's death, Victor Harrington felt something stir inside him. Not just gratitude or friendship, but something deeper. Something that made him want to be worthy of the faith Celeste was beginning to place in him. As he drove through the quiet streets, Victor made a decision. It was time to let go of the past. Time to stop punishing himself for Michael's death. Time to believe that he deserved a second chance at happiness. And perhaps, just perhaps, that second chance had a name: Celeste. The following Sunday morning, Victor arrived at Celeste's apartment with a bag of fresh pastries and orange juice. Lily, still in her pajamas but feeling much better thanks to the antibiotics, squealed with delight when she saw the chocolate croissants. "Can I have two?" she asked, looking hopefully at her aunt. Celeste smiled. "One now, and maybe another later, if you eat a proper lunch." As Lily happily munched on her pastry, leaving chocolate smudges on her chin, Victor watched with an expression that was becoming more familiar, a look of contentment that softened his usually stern features. "She recovers quickly," he commented to Celeste as they sat at the small kitchen table. "Children do," Celeste replied. "Yesterday she was burning with fever, and today she's already asking if she can go to the park." "Not today," Victor said firmly. "The doctor said she needs to rest for at least 2 more days." Celeste raised an eyebrow, amused by his authoritative tone. "I know. I wasn't planning to take her out." Victor looked slightly embarrassed. "Sorry, I'm used to giving orders at work." "I've noticed," Celeste teased gently. Their easy conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Celeste frowned, not expecting visitors. When she opened the door, Richard Blackwood stood there, impeccably dressed even on a Sunday morning. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he took in Celeste's casual weekend clothes. "Ms. Martin, I hope I'm not interrupting anything." Before Celeste could respond, Victor appeared behind her. The two men stared at each other, tension filling the air. "Richard," Victor's voice was cold. "What are you doing here?" Richard's smile became even more forced. "I could ask you the same question, Victor, but I think the answer is obvious." His eyes flickered back to Celeste. "May I come in? I have some business to discuss with Victor." Reluctantly, Celeste stepped aside. Richard entered the small apartment, his expensive cologne filling the space. His eyes swept critically over the modest furnishings before landing on Lily, who was watching him with curious eyes. "Hello there," Richard said with false cheerfulness. "You must be Lily. I'm Mr. Blackwood. I work with your aunt's friend." Lily, always perceptive, edged closer to Victor. "Are you his boss?" Richard laughed, the sound brittle. "No, sweetheart, he's my boss, though sometimes I wonder if he remembers that, given how distracted he's been lately." "What do you want, Richard?" Victor asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. "The Singapore deal is in trouble," Richard said. "Lynn called this morning. He's threatening to walk unless we make some concessions." Victor frowned. "Lynn agreed to our terms last week. Well, he's changed his mind. He wants to speak to you directly. Today. I've been trying to call you, but you weren't answering your phone." Victor pulled his phone from his pocket. realizing he had put it on silent. There were 7 missed calls from Richard. "I can set up a video conference at the office in an hour," Richard continued, "but we need to act fast. This is $100 million deal, Victor. We can't afford to lose it." Victor looked at Celeste, torn between his responsibility to his company and his desire to spend the day with her and Lily. "Go," Celeste said softly. "It's okay. We'll be fine." Victor nodded, reluctant, but knowing she was right. "I'll call you later," he promised. As the 2 men left, Richard cast a final glance at Celeste, his expression unreadable. There was something in his eyes that made her uneasy, a calculation, a coldness that went beyond simple disapproval. After they were gone, Lily came to stand beside her aunt. "I don't like that man," she said simply. "Neither do I, sweetie," Celeste admitted. "Neither do I." At Harrington Global, Victor and Richard worked through the crisis with the Singapore client. By late afternoon, the deal was back on track, but Victor couldn't shake his irritation with Richard. "How did you know where? How to find me this morning?" he asked as they packed up their materials in the conference room. Richard shrugged. "It wasn't hard to figure out. You've been spending all your free time with the cleaning woman lately." "Her name is Celeste," Victor said sharply, "and my personal life is none of your business." Richard sat down, his expression becoming serious. "It is when it affects the company. Board members are starting to ask questions, Victor, about your judgment, your focus, about whether you're still the right man to lead Harrington Global. The company is more profitable than it's ever been," Victor snapped. "My personal life has nothing to do with that, doesn't it?" Richard leaned forward. "You used to work 18-hour days. You were ruthless, focused, driven. Now you're leaving early to have dinner with your cleaning lady and her niece. You're turning down important business meetings to play nursemaid when the kid gets sick." Victor felt his anger rising. "You've been watching me." "I've been concerned," Richard corrected. "We all have. This isn't like you, Victor. Ever since your brother died, you've been like a machine, single-minded, unemotional, dedicated only to building the company. It made you a hell of a CEO, but now?" He shook his head. "Now you're letting yourself get distracted by a pretty face and a sob story." Victor stood abruptly, his hands clenched at his sides. "Don't talk about Celeste like that." Richard stood as well, undaunted. "Someone needs to say it. She's using you, Victor. She sees a rich, lonely man and smells opportunity. The singing, the sad stories about her dead sister. It's all designed to pull at your heartstrings, and it's working." For a moment, Victor looked like he might strike Richard, but then a cold calm settled over him. "You're fired," he said quietly. Richard's eyes widened. "What?" "You heard me. Clean out your desk. Security will escort you out." "You can't fire me," Richard protested. "I've been with this company for 15 years. I know things, Victor. Things about how you've operated that the board might not appreciate learning." Victor stepped closer, his voice dangerously soft. "Are you threatening me, Richard?" Richard swallowed hard but held his ground. "I'm reminding you that we've been in the trenches together. We've made decisions together that weren't always by the book. If I go down, you might come with me." For a long moment, the 2 men stared at each other. Then Victor's phone rang, breaking the tension. He glanced at the screen. It was Celeste. "Think carefully about what you're doing," Richard warned as Victor reached for his phone. "For the company's sake, for your own sake." Victor turned his back on Richard and answered the call. "Celeste, is everything okay?" Her voice was trembling. "Victor, someone was just here, a woman. She said she was from Child Protective Services. She was asking questions about Lily, about my arrangement with Mrs. Garcia, about my work hours." Victor felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "What did she say exactly?" "That they'd received a complaint that Lily was being left alone or with inadequate supervision, that I was working too many hours to properly care for her." Celeste's voice broke. "Victor, they can't take her away from me. She's all I have left." "They won't," Victor promised, his mind racing. He turned to look at Richard, who was watching him with a smug expression. "I'll be right there." After hanging up, Victor advanced on Richard. "Did you do this?" he demanded. "Call CPS on Celeste?" Richard shrugged, not bothering to deny it. Like I said, I've been concerned. A woman working 2 jobs, leaving her traumatized niece with an elderly neighbor at all hours. It doesn't sound like an ideal situation for a child, does it? Victor had never felt such rage. He grabbed Richard by the collar, pulling him close. If anything happens to Lily or Celeste because of this, I will destroy you. Do you understand? Me. Not just your career, your entire life. Richard didn't flinch. It's your choice, Victor. The company or the cleaning woman, you can't have both. Victor released him with a disgusted shove. Watch me. At Celeste's apartment, he found her pacing nervously while Lily watched TV, unaware of the danger threatening their little family. They're coming back tomorrow, Celeste said, her eyes red from crying. For a formal inspection. If they decide I'm an unfit guardian... That won't happen, Victor assured her, pulling her into his arms. I promise you, Celeste, I won't let them take Lily from you. As he held her, Victor's mind was working, formulating a plan. By the time Celeste had calmed down, he knew what he needed to do. Celeste, he said, taking her hands in his, I need to ask you something important. She looked up at him, her eyes still wet with tears. What is it? Will you marry me? The question hung in the air between them. Celeste stared at him in shock. What? Victor, that's crazy. We barely know each other, and besides, I know you're just asking because of the CPS situation. No, Victor said firmly. I'm asking because I love you. Because these past few weeks with you and Lily have been the happiest I've had in years. Because when you sing, I remember what it feels like to be alive. Celeste shook her head, overwhelmed. This is too fast, and what about your company? Richard made it clear that I'm a liability to you. Richard is a problem I can handle, Victor said. And maybe it is fast. But sometimes you just know when something is right. When I'm with you, I feel like the man I used to be before Michael died, the man I want to be again. He cupped her face gently in his hands. I'm not asking you to decide right now, just think about it. Let me help you and Lily. Let me be part of your family. Celeste looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt or insincerity. But all she saw was warmth and determination. What about Lily? She asked softly. Have you thought about what it means to become a parent overnight? Victor smiled. Lily is part of why I love you, Celeste. She's an amazing child. Being her stepfather would be an honor, not a burden. Celeste's heart raced at his words. Could this really be happening? Could this powerful, complicated man truly love her, not just because she sang a song that touched him, but for who she was? I need time, she finally said, to think, to make sure this is right for all of us. Victor nodded. Of course. But in the meantime, let me help with the CPS situation. I have lawyers who can make sure your rights as Lily's guardian are protected. The next day, when the CPS worker returned, she found not just Celeste, but also Victor, and 2 attorneys from one of the city's most prestigious law firms. The inspection was brief and professional, and by the end the case was marked for closure, with no concerns noted about Lily's care. After the officials left, Celeste turned to Victor. Thank you. I don't know how to repay you for this. Victor took her hands in his. You don't need to repay me, but I would like an answer to my question. Celeste took a deep breath. I care about you, Victor, more than I thought possible after such a short time, but marriage, that's a huge step. What are you afraid of? Victor asked gently. That one day you'll wake up and realize that I'm just an ordinary woman who happened to sing the right song at the right time. That the novelty will wear off, and you'll resent being tied to someone so simple. Victor shook his head. You're anything but simple, Celeste Martin. You're the strongest, most loving person I've ever met. And I'm not asking you to marry me because of a song. I'm asking because when I look at my future, I can't imagine it without you and Lily in it. Tears filled Celeste's eyes. What about your company? Richard said. Richard is gone, Victor interrupted. I fired him yesterday. And as for the company... He paused, considering his words carefully. Michael and I built Harrington Global, together. After he died, I thought the company was all I had left of him, so I poured everything into it. But the truth is, he wouldn't recognize what it's become, what I've become. Cold, ruthless, feared rather than respected. Victor squeezed her hands. You've helped me see that, Celeste, and now I have a chance to rebuild it into something Michael would be proud of. Something I can be proud of. Lily, who had been playing quietly nearby, suddenly appeared at Celeste's side. Are you going to marry Victor, Aunt Celeste? She asked, her eyes bright with hope. Because I think you should. He makes you smile a lot, and you didn't smile much before. Celeste looked from her niece to Victor, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Is that right? I smile more now? Lily nodded solemnly. Way more. And he reads to me almost as good as Mommy used to. Plus he promised to take us to the beach this summer. Did he now? Celeste raised an eyebrow at Victor, who had the grace to look slightly sheepish. I might have mentioned it as a possibility, he admitted. If you said, yes. Celeste knew there would be challenges ahead. Victor's world was so different from hers, and bridging that gap wouldn't be easy. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something she'd never expected to find again after her sister died. A future filled with love and hope. Yes, she said, softly. Yes, I'll marry you. Victor's face lit up with a smile so bright it transformed him completely. Gone was the machine, the cold-feared CEO. In his place was simply a man in love, his eyes shining with joy. He pulled Celeste into his arms and kissed her, a gentle kiss that held the promise of all the days to come. Lily clapped her hands, in delight, and then wiggled her way between them, wrapping her arms around both their waists, a family. Something none of them had thought they would find again. 3 months later, Celeste stood in Victor's, now their, penthouse apartment, looking out at the city lights. The view was spectacular, but it wasn't what made her happiest about her new home. It was the sound of laughter coming from Lily's room, where Victor was reading her a bedtime story, complete with funny voices that had the little girl giggling uncontrollably. So much had changed. Celeste had quit both her jobs, though she insisted on keeping busy, now volunteering at Lily's school and taking classes to finish her long-abandoned college degree. Victor had scaled back his hours at Harrington Global, bringing in a new management team that shared his revised vision for the company. They had been married in a simple ceremony with only a few close friends present. No lavish reception, no society photographers, just a quiet celebration of the love that had grown between them. There had been adjustments, of course. Celeste sometimes felt out of place in Victor's world of wealth and privilege. Victor occasionally fell back into his old workaholic habits, but they were learning day by day how to blend their lives together. As she stood by the window, lost in thought, Celeste began to hum the lullaby, her mother's lullaby, the song that had started it. Oh, she didn't notice Victor approaching until his arms wrapped around her from behind. I love when you sing that, he murmured, resting his chin on her shoulder. I know, Celeste smiled, leaning back against him. Is Lily asleep? Almost. She wants you to come say good night. Hand in hand, they walked to Lily's bedroom. The little girl was already drowsy, her eyes heavy with sleep. Sing the song, Aunt Celeste, she requested, as she did every night. Celeste sat on the edge of the bed and began to sing the lullaby, her voice soft and sweet in the quiet room. Victor joined her, his deeper voice harmonizing with hers, a new tradition they had started, singing together to send Lily off to sleep. As the last notes faded, Lily's eyes closed completely. Celeste leaned down to kiss her forehead, and then she and Victor tiptoed from the room. In their own bedroom, Victor pulled Celeste into his arms. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. I've been waiting for the right moment. He handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate music box carved from pale wood with mother-of-pearl inlay. When Celeste wound the key, it played her mother's lullaby, the notes pure and sweet in the quiet room. How did you? She began, tears filling her eyes. I had it made, Victor explained, from the sheet music in your living room. I know how much that song means to you, to us. Celeste clutched the music box to her chest. It's perfect, she whispered. Thank you. Victor brushed a tear from her cheek. No, thank you. For singing when you thought no one was listening, for showing me that it was still possible to feel, to love, for bringing music back into my life when I thought it was gone forever. He lowered his forehead to hers, their breath mingling in the small space between them. "I love you, Celeste Harrington." The new name still sent a thrill through her. "I love you too, Victor." As the music box continued to play, they stood in each other's arms, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, a cleaning woman's song heard by a man who had forgotten how to feel. Sometimes, Celeste reflected, the most beautiful melodies are the ones we never expected to hear. And sometimes, the greatest love stories begin when we think no one is listening. The end.